Goetia. Let's talk Goetia. So this is possibly one of the most popular system of spirits that is well known. And like most things that are popular and accepted by the general public, there is way more ignorance surrounding this topic than there is clarity. I'm even willing to wager that most people don't know anything about the Goetia, even those who do choose to work with it. Now that may seem like a bold statement, but I advise you to take a look at everything that the general public does, whether it's investing in stocks and crypto or anything that requires a detailed knowledge of a subject. Most people don't have detailed knowledge. They have general knowledge based off of what other people told them, and they know just enough to make themselves feel comfortable. But in any case, the main flaw of the Goetia is that most people come from a foundation of Judeo-Christian background, and they use that same Judeo-Christian background to define this system of spirit work. So let's go back a little bit. When you think of the word Goetia, you're probably thinking of a group of demon spirits rising up from hell, and you being able to conjure them to do your bidding, right? You send out these demons to go get you wealth, to go get you some sex, or maybe to heal yourself or someone else from something gross and sticky. We get this image from movies and television, and even from the church, of these horned creatures with gnashing teeth and wings, and some of them have 3 heads of a toad and a cat and spiders' legs and all this crazy stuff. But no one ever stops to look at the origin of these things. We only take what we've been given. That's one of the fatal flaws of our culture today, is that we don't research. We only take what we're given. So for future reference, I highly advise you to do some research on something that you're interested in, because oftentimes the mainstream is incorrect. Now, like I said, all of that is coming from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Of course, if the church is in control of what people believe spiritually, they're going to paint every other path as something evil and demonic and dangerous and harmful. But that's not how it originated. As a matter of fact, Goetia is far older than Christianity. As a matter of fact, Christianity is a rehash of something borrowed of something else. In any case, the word Goetia comes from the word goace. And if you ask Aleister Crowley, he'll say that the word goace means howling or screeching or screaming. But that's not quite the full story. To understand the Goetia and the goace and the origin, we have to understand ancient culture. So in particular, this is coming from Greek culture. And in ancient Greece, there was a much more solid connection to the ways of the underworld, the ways of the unconscious mind. And in dealing with the ways of the unconscious mind, altered states were often used as a bridge or a gateway to assist in doing work with those who have been recently departed or even long departed. And when I say altered states, I don't necessarily mean drugs and intoxication. Altered states can also be achieved through different moods and different atmospheres. For example, during the funeral rites, there would be a selected group of women who were professional wailers, professional criers, professional mourners, and they would mourn and cry and screech and scream and even pull their own hair out and rip their clothes for days, right? And this is around one who recently passed away. They would actually, if there were women in the family, they would all be involved in this, and if there weren't any, they would hire women. This was a commonplace activity. So imagine being in this atmosphere where someone that you love has just passed, and there is screaming and crying and wailing going on all day, for days. Imagine what type of state that would put you in. Imagine what type of feeling, what type of vibe. It would be very, very dreadful, very melancholy, very depressing, very dark, very morose. I want you to understand that things that human beings have done for an extremely long time, they don't just disappear. They actually echo on and on and on. So this is where we get this Gothic culture. This is where we get this subculture of just dark melancholy, and how it's also associated with the dead, how it's also associated with funerals and things like that. Well, this can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece, and possibly definitely even before. So these people were called the goace. That's why Crowley said that goace is translated from the screeching and the howlers. And this is what the females did. The males, they were the ones who read the funerary rites. They read the conjurations and the scripts and the mantras and the texts. And from that ancient practice, we get this sorcerer, right? We get this person who deals in the works of the dead. So at the time, goace was a general term that meant a person who could work as a psychopomp. And if you don't know, a psychopomp is an individual who assists the dead in crossing over, or assists the living to come out of the dead. So basically they stand on the gateway between life and death. Those are the two realms of consciousness, living and dead. Now, over time, goace became to be known as a cuss word, as a curse word. When it's seen in the Bible, it's often referred to as a slanderous term. As a matter of fact, I have it on my screen here. In the Bible, we can see goace, and this is Matthew 4:15. We see goace as a wailer, a sorcerer, a swindler, right? A swindler, a conjurer, a deceiver, an imposter. And it says here, a shameless cheat pretending to use supernatural power, an actor, a cheap imposter looking for self-gain, posing to be someone he isn't, a charlatan. This refers to a seducer, a fraud who sounds off like a whining enchanter. This person uses their verbal spells and incantations to give the false impression that they can do miracles. Given that definition, it really makes one question and wonder why the Christians are so salty. Why would they give such a description? Well, the thing to understand is that the ancient ways have been here for a very, very long time, much longer than Christianity. Now, at the time of Christianity, and even at around the era of the golden age of Greece, around 5 BC, 4 BC, something like that, a new thing began to happen, and this is organized democracy, organized religion. Basically, things were transferring from the king, things were transferring from oracles and different priests from different gods. Things are changing from that system over to the politic, the democracy, where one for all for one, where everything is governed by the collective. So what that means is the ruling powers, the powers that be, were stretching their empire, dominating and conquering any and every facet of human life to make sure that it can be ruled and regulated and useful for the community. So what that means is, for when it comes to religion and access to God and spirituality, the church needed to be in power. So the church has employed the priests of the church, which are regulated by the government. So what that means is there's no room for the goace, there's no room for the sorcerers, because these people don't have to answer to the government. So just imagine, just like in Star Wars Episode 3, when Senator Palpatine executed Order 66 and they had to wipe out all the Jedi in order for the Sith Empire to rule. The same thing happens throughout history multiple times, and this is one of those times. So with the spiritually connected goace being systematically wiped out, the word became a slander word, as a false prophet. Because of course you can't have someone working magic if there's Jesus and God and the church. But trust and believe, the whole reason that we still have the Goetia and these things like that is because several of these priests and monks were still practicing the way of the goace, but they just covered it and disguised it under Christianity. This is how we still have these grimoires and these books, because at the time most people couldn't read, and these books were written in Latin. So they were able to get away with it for a very long time. That also explains why we have the legend of King Solomon and his particular 72 spirits that he worked with. All of this is coded under the Judeo-Christian system. It did not originate that way. So please understand, the Goetia does not come from King Solomon and the Hebrew stuff. If that's what you believe, then it's time to restructure your beliefs, because that was not the beginning. This is why I say most people don't know what they're talking about, because most everyone who I've ever talked to about Goetia believes that Goetia started with King Solomon and the Hebrew system. And if you start there, if that's your origin, you're incorrect off the bat. Now, I don't want to make this super detailed about the Goetia, because the next class, the next course coming after this spirit summoning mastery system, what's coming next is specifically a system I'm working with the Goetia. But just to kind of sum up what's happening here, because goace became a slander word, it was deliberately replaced and removed. It was replaced with the word magus. So essentially, a magus is intrinsically linked to Goetia. Now, magus is actually a Persian word, and there were several battles between Greece and the Persians. You guys recall the famous movie 300. But the Persians were responsible for the phrase that we use today, magus and magic. But in truth, Western spiritual work originated with this type of system. Now, essentially what we have here today is a collection of 72 spirits. Now, in truth, the goace represents a worker who stands in between the realms of the living and the dead, as a channeler, as an oracle, as somebody that is able to translate from one side to the other side. And a Christian may be marked as someone who does prayer and who does certain rituals and who doesn't do certain things associated with Christians, what Christians don't do. Those things make you a Christian. But if you do the things you're not supposed to do, or you don't do the things you're supposed to do, suddenly you're not a Christian anymore. You lose your title. Well, that isn't so for a goace. There is no thing you can point to. There is no tool, right? Despite what you see with the triangles and the circles and these amulets and all this other stuff, there's no tool that makes you a goace or a goetic practitioner. Not truly. The goetic tool is the practitioner themselves. See, goace is a state. To be a goace is a lifestyle. And the reason that we have 72 spirits and all these legions associated with them is because there's actually a lot more, infinitely more spirits than just the 72. The 72 were only the spirits that King Solomon chose to work with. Those were the ones that he developed over his lifetime. The reason that we have 72 is so that it could be forced into alignment with the Hebrew system, so that it could be forced into alignment with astrology and Kabbalah. But in truth, it goes much, much deeper. So, also understand that when it comes to these states, altered states that I mentioned, there's one aspect about pleasure and joy and rapture, and that's what most people think about when it comes to a spiritual contact. But there's another side, there's a dark side that comes with fear, that comes with, the way of darkness, that melancholy atmosphere that I mentioned, that the mourners were performing during, or invoking during the funeral. And this is the type of state of mind that you will have the most success in working with the Goetia. I'm not saying go out and be depressed, but what I'm saying is that's probably why you're so drawn to the dark side and horror and these things from the beyond. It's possible that you have spiritual roots in this system. But to kind of conclude and wrap things up, the Goetia that the world knows, the Goetia that the general public understands, is a system of 72 spirits, and they all represent aspects of the unconscious mind and the masks that we use to channel those aspects. We can think of a great ocean, because truly this is the worship of the Great Mother. We can think of a great ocean that has immense power, and if one were to face that immense power, you would drown. So what we have to do is we have to put a wall up, and we have to build tubes and pipes and channels to siphon in water at different pressure to serve different needs. These different pipes and tubes that meter and counterbalance and mediate the water, these can be seen as the spirits of the Goetia. So just like I mentioned before about the mask and how you don't deal directly with the soul of an ancestor, but you deal with the mask that you had contact to, the same thing goes with the Goetia. Instead of dealing with an individual person, now we're starting to work with the great unknown, the great mother. And instead of working directly with this feminine aspect of reality, we have to channel and siphon that encounter with different entities. So the 72 Goetic spirits we have from King Solomon are the 72 spirits that he's picked up along the way. And they're typically a collection of spirits that were at one time celebrated and worshipped gods and goddesses of different pantheons. So he's collected them and utilized them to represent different needs and abilities of the unconscious mind, and as a mask to channel them through into his reality. But there are many, many more. So that's a short and skinny on the Goetia. Stay tuned because there's going to be a whole lot more about this.